In my last CRX video, we made custom brake lines, which took forever, but eventually we got the brakes working, as you can see. So let's move on to the next thing. And let's start off this video with some OEM parts from the dealer, including hard lines, bolts, brackets, and it all has to do with the slave cylinder and getting the clutch to actually working. As you know, the CRX came with a cable to actuate the clutch, whereas the K series is hydraulic, so you need a way to convert it over. Anyway, let's mess with this side that's attached to the slave cylinder. As you can see, this is the factory hard line, and I'm just gonna go ahead and loosely thread it in. This is a factory bracket that would normally bolt up to the engine mount on a regular stock car, but because we don't have stock mounts here, we're using a Hasport mounts. There's no way, no provision to go ahead and bolt up this bracket, so I'm planning on cutting the bracket and just welding it onto the Hasport mount. As you can see, I still got the hard line in place, and that's really just to dictate where the bracket has to sit. I'm gonna go ahead and tack this in place. And as you could hear and see, that wasn't a very good weld, and the reason for that is because I didn't have my ground in a really good spot. So here I am moving my ground strap, and I actually got the hard line out of place since we got the bracket tacked up. It's not going to move anywhere. But that weld sounded a lot better with a proper ground. But I'm going to go ahead, remove the bracket, fully weld it, and even give it a decent coat of paint so it doesn't rust away. And that looks like it turned out pretty well. So let's go ahead and put the mount back on the transmission and see how well everything lines up. If I did my job correctly, this hard line should fall right into place. And so far it's looking pretty good. So here's the flexible rubber hose that I'm using. Yes, it's a regular standard flexible hose. I know a lot of people advocate for those like steel braided lines, but guys, there's nothing wrong with rubber flexible hoses. They've been used on so many cars for countless years. They have been proven reliable and they work. If you go to the dealer right now and buy a Ferrari, a Corvette, a GTR, guess what? They're gonna have rubber hoses on them because they work. Anyway, let me stop my rant. So this is the other bracket that mounts onto the rail of the car, and it's gonna go just like this, but it has to be mounted on the rail, of course. So that's gonna be a project for a little bit later on. But for right now, I noticed that the ports on the bottom of my intake manifold are just open, and if I forget about these, that's going to be a vacuum leak in the future. So I'm plugging them off right now while it's fresh in my mind. You guys remember when I said it's going to be a project for a little later on? I guess I meant a full 15 seconds later on, because here was the bracket. Yes, I made a bracket for a bracket, guys. So the bracket that I bought from the dealer where the rubber hose goes on isn't the bracket that I want to mount directly on the frame or weld onto the frame. I don't know if I want to weld it like permanently. I think I want to panel bond it. But for right now, let's go ahead and just put 2 little tacks. And guys, I did a ton of measuring on where this thing is supposed to be located. So I just went off of measurements. Of course, the engine is not in the car, but I put 1 tack at the bottom, and I'm gonna go ahead, get the bracket out the way, get the magnet out the way, and then I'll put 1 more tack over here on the right side. And trust me, I know the bracket looks like it's crooked. It's just the way it's designed, okay? When everything is in the car and you're looking at it from like top down or from the side, it's all gonna make sense. It will look level and straight once everything's said and done, trust me. So that's what the bracket looks like. I'm just gonna go ahead and snug it down, and we won't be able to tell if I put that in the correct place until the engine goes in. Speaking of the engine going in, guess what I'm doing? Yes, let's go ahead and put this engine in. And this is nerve-wracking doing this by myself. I know people keep telling me about putting the engine on like a dolly and raising up the car and lowering the car on top of the engine. They're saying that is much easier, and I've never tried that. But guys, did you see what happened right here? Let me slow it down for you. Boom. You saw how the engine just slightly bumped the master cylinder. Well, guess what? That little bump cost me $100 because it actually cracked the reservoir of the brake fluid. And after that little bump, I had a constant brake fluid leak. So the only way to get a new reservoir was to buy a whole complete master cylinder, which cost me $100 after shipping. And I simply grabbed the reservoir off of the new master and I just swapped them over, and the leak has been fixed. But isn't that crazy? A tiny little bump like that cost me $100. So yeah, it sucks trying to put one of these engines in from the top by yourself without a wingman guiding you. You get what I'm saying? But it is what it is. That it had to get done. Do you guys remember how in one of my previous videos I mentioned how I had to make the mount on the right side of the car be bolt-in instead of weld-in? And it's for this exact reason. You can see how I had to lower the mount in place after the engine was pretty much like 90% there. It's the only way I found I could get this engine in without too much crazy stuff going on. So here goes the moment of truth, guys. Here goes our rubber hose. And look at that beauty. That is perfection. I nailed the location of where that bracket goes. And guys, that is, if that's not the most OEM thing you've ever seen, I don't know what is. Look at that. Anyway, let's go ahead and install our shifter bracket that we modified in a previous video, and I made this whole elaborate bracket to retain the retainer clips to make sure they don't pop out while we're driving. So yeah, that was a crazy thing. But we could also install the shift cables while we're here, of course. And here goes that custom bracket I was talking about. As you can see, I just knocked in both of the retainer clips, and this custom bracket gets bolted in from the backside. And the whole purpose of this is to prevent those retainer clips from jumping out by themselves. That is a real thing. It does happen. So it's like insurance for your insurance. And now we could install another custom bracket, which is not only the holder for our fuel pressure regulator, but it is also the brake master cylinder brace. And if you look at the background there, look at those beautiful brake lines, guys. Go check out that previous video where I made those custom brake lines. That was a good video. So let's go ahead and plug in all of our custom fuel lines as well. Yes, everything is custom on this build, guys. It's taking me 7 years. I'm not exaggerating, okay? Over 7 years building or just working on this project in general, whether it's the car or the engine. So let's go ahead and install it once again. Custom bracket for the throttle body, so we could get the throttle cable coming at a 90-degree from the throttle body. Look how nice and cool that works. Now that that's done, since we connected the shift cable to the transmission side, we have to connect the other end to the shifter. So that's what I went ahead and did right now. You know what I'm noticing, guys, is that all of my hard work is paying off. Go figure, right? All the years I've spent when I focus on one thing, whether it's the brake lines, the fuel lines, the shifter cables, custom brackets, as I'm putting everything together for this one video, I'm noticing how perfect everything is lining up and how easily everything is going together. And this is where I'm really seeing and enjoying the fruits of my labor, because I see everything that I worked so hard for just kind of falling together, and everything seems like it's just working. And I love that. I love to see that all of my hard work is paying off and watching the whole build come together. So we got the custom radiator hoses all done. Both of the CV shafts have been pushed into the transmission. Brand new seals. Watch the previous video on that also. Headers installed. Check, check, and check. Here was the custom engine harness that I had made specifically for the CRX with the K24 swap. And it looks very professional, very nice, and it should, because this thing was expensive, guys. This was a ridiculously expensive harness. Anyway, let's go ahead and start plugging everything in. With all of this done, let's move on to the ECU. That's right, I'm going with Haltech, and from the amount of dust on the box, you can tell I've had this thing for a while. But I'm just so proud to finally have a Haltech. This thing is a thing of beauty. Would you look at that? So I went with the Elite 1500. It is more than capable, and my custom made harness plugs directly into the Haltech. There's another thing of beauty. So we're gonna go ahead, plug this in, and everything just fits and works nicely. I'm just so proud to have this thing. But you can see there is a sub harness, and it plugs in right here. So we'll go ahead and get that knocked out real fast. Now this sub harness has to get fed through the firewall to plug into some connectors out there, but these 4 wires right here have to be tapped into the original harness that went into the OEM ECU. So on this side of the firewall, this is where those other 2 connectors plug in. You can see one of them has grease, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean out all that nasty grease before I plug it in. With all of that done, we could move on to the battery. So I bought a custom battery tray, and do you see this massive size difference? The type of battery that they expect you to put into that little tray has like 230 code cranking amps. Nah, that's not enough for me. So I modified the heck out of that custom battery tray to accept a full-size battery with 500 code cranking amps. Because if there's one thing I hate, it's a dead battery and a car that won't start. So the other end of the bracket, you can see I did some crappy welds. You got to cut me some slack here. There wasn't any space, and on top of that, it's supposed to be like a, you know, is it gonna work type of deal. So I didn't want to fully commit to welding that one bracket back there in place, but here I am test fitting, and the full-size battery just barely fits inside of here. I gave myself just enough clearance, and I messed up the dimensions, and I still managed to make it work. So here goes the custom power cables and wires that I made. Of course, you can see everything got crimped and then heat shrinked. So all of these wires were custom made by me. You can see the power wires are real super heavy duty gauge. The grounds, 2 of them are the same thickness and one of them slightly thicker. The main ground for the transmission that is closest to the starter is slightly thicker. So here goes the first cable underneath the intake manifold, and then it goes straight to the radiator support. The second ground cable is the top of the valve cover going to the strut tower. Those are the 2 similar size, like thinner gauge ground wires, and then the thicker one goes over here right on top of the frame of the chassis, and it kind of loops down. I know it's a little bit long, sure it could have been a little bit shorter, but it's fine, and it goes directly to that big bolt right there that is very close to the starter to make sure the starter has a really good ground. So I went ahead and installed these heavy duty power wires. You can see the top one goes to the starter, and it's going to work its way to the left, up and over, but the other one goes down and meets up with the alternator down here, and here's a shot of that, and they both kind of loop up. You can see I have a temporary zip tie to hold everything where I want it to go. 2 of the lines are going to go to the battery, of course, and then they're also going to just kind of loop around here and go right to the factory CRX fuse box. And that was tricky to try to make these things work with the factory fuse box and make them fit inside of there, but I got it working. And here's a shot of the ginormous ground cable going to the chassis. This isn't my ideal place, but it's quick and easy and temporary at best. So here goes the positive side. Of course, it's going to have both of the positive wires going into it. I just have to cut the second one to length. And if you haven't noticed, that's a brand new battery. Yeah, 200 bucks for that bad boy. Ugh, things are rough right now. So with all the power wires and the grounds connected, let's make sure they actually work. So I'm going to use a power probe, and I'm just going to send power to the S terminal on the starter. So if all my grounds and powers are good, this engine should crank over. I think now is a appropriate time to start checking fluids. I knew that the engine already had oil in it, but it doesn't hurt to just check it and top it off. I've actually heard stories of people starting their brand new build for the first time with no oil because they forgot about it, and guess what? Destroyed the whole engine. So topped off the oil, plenty full, brand new fresh oil. The cooling system, I know I'm gonna end up having to drain this stuff out soon, so I don't want to put coolant in it because coolant is kind of hard to clean up. It doesn't evaporate, so water, distilled water, is fine for now. The transmission, I bought it off of eBay. Okay, 6-speed Civic Si transmission, LSD, but it came bone dry. I checked it, there isn't a single drop of anything in it, so it only makes sense that now's the time, since we now have the axles in it, to fill it up with brand new Honda genuine trans fluid. Okay, so go ahead, get that knocked out, and I kept filling it until it started to drain out of the fill plug, and as you can see, that's going on, so we are good there. I'm gonna go ahead and put the plug back on it. Now looking at the oil pressure sensor down there, you see the connector on it. It has like this bullet style, and here goes the connector for my custom made harness. Yeah, they're not the same, which means I have to buy a new oil pressure sensor, and by new I mean a $200 oil pressure sensor. That is ridiculous. But hey, I don't make this stuff up, okay? It's just what needs to get done. So let me go ahead and pipe in this flexible hose. If you're wondering why I'm not mounting it directly on the engine, it's because you're not supposed to mount, well, you can, but for the longevity of the sensor, if you want it to last long, don't mount it on the engine, remote mount it. So I'm making a custom bracket here, and as you can see, I started off with a washer and it turned into this. Yeah, that was a few hours worth of fabricating. So let me show you how this works. Obviously the sensor sits inside the bracket. You can see I put a green O-ring. You could choose any color you want, but I put a green O-ring in the center of the sensor as it goes into the bracket, and it kind of works almost like a bushing. So basically the sensor isn't hard mounted to the bracket, it's almost like it's floating in the center of it with the O-ring. And I thought that was pretty neat, just kind of a genius idea that just randomly happened. And if you notice the little claw that was coming off the side of my bracket, it's for a zip tie, because even though I feel like the O-ring is holding the sensor in nice and snug, there's nothing wrong with a little bit of extra security. And even with a zip tie, I think it still looks pretty clean if you ask me. So I'm gonna go ahead and leave this bare for now, because any of my brackets that you've seen me custom make, I'm not painting any of them because I plan on getting all of them zinc coated so that they don't rust. So that's why I'm just leaving them bare for now. But right here on the firewall, I drilled a hole right through the pinch weld, and I didn't like the thickness of this metal right here. I just didn't think it was strong enough, so I actually panel bonded a piece of steel, and that is what's supplying the strength to this pinch weld and making it really strong right where this thing mounts up. And guys, is that not clean? Come on, that's a pretty clean install, you cannot deny that. So I'm super happy with the way this bracket came out, and there goes our oil pressure sensor. And now it's time to actually see if this engine's gonna start. It's unknown at this point because I started building this engine 7 years ago. It's never ran. And look at this rat's nest of wires I have going on. So the first step was I went looking for any loose wires that need to be plugged in, and I just started plugging in things that look like they fit, and especially ground wires. Any loose ground wires that I found, I made sure to ground them to the chassis. So in case anyone is throwing out that idea, I already did that. As you can see, my CRX is fitted with a push start button, and when I drove this car into this garage with the stock engine and I parked it here 2 years ago, this push start was working just fine. So I'm like, I know it works, right? But for some reason we're getting the red ring of death at the push start, and there's no power to the Haltech. And that's when I remembered that this car had like external modules connected in order for this thing to run. So I spent close to an hour looking for these things, and here I found them in the original glove box. You know how it goes with project stuff. Stuff is just thrown around and you're like, I know I've seen it somewhere. It's just a matter of finding it. With those modules plugged in, let's see if it made a difference. Alright, so that didn't work. I looked in the back of the CRX and I found this sub harness. I don't know where it goes, but I'm sure it was underneath the dash at one point. So I figured, let me just start looking for connectors that look like they match up and just start plugging things in, right? That makes sense. So I found out that this sub harness is part of the cluster connector. So I went ahead and plugged in the cluster because I'm like, that can only help us, right? The more things we plug in, the better. Plus we get some idea with the cluster being plugged in if we're getting power. And then I found this relay box that goes back to the fuse pump that was actually, I said fuse pump, that goes back to the fuel pump that was actually missing a fuse. So I put a fuse in at that point. And then I decided to go on the eWeb and look at pictures of the CRX's fuse panel so I could hopefully find a picture that showed me where some of these connectors go. And the first thing I'm noticing is right in the center, you see that blue plug? Well, I have a blue plug right here. And so far, no progress. So I decided to look at that picture once again, and you see the blue plug in the center? Well, off to the left of it, there's another plug plugged in, and on my fuse panel, there's nothing plugged into there. So I know I have to go on a hunt for a connector that fits into there. We got power at the Haltech. What happens if I try to crank the engine? Oh my god, it's so freaking scary and weird to hit the start button and the fuel pump primes. But whenever I turn, this is the key guys, the push button. Whenever I push the button, the power on the Haltech turns on. And if you hold it, it's supposed to crank. No, that turned it off. Let's see if I hold it now. Okay. No cranking, which I'm not surprised. We have to connect the laptop. Guys, it's like 3 a.m. right now. I'm like crazy nervous right now. My hands are shaking. Guys, I don't know. This came with the Haltech. I don't know if I needed some sort of a USB stick. We'll find out. But I got a brand new Dell laptop. Just bought this a few days ago. Thankfully, I got it on sale. It's normally a $700 laptop, and I got it for 400 bucks on sale, so not too bad. But just another example of how this whole project is a money pit. So all right, let's connect the laptop. All right, so laptop is up and running. I just plugged in the Haltech, and you can see something is happening. Something's like downloading. Okay, guys, I've never done this before, and I have no idea what I'm looking at. All I know is before, when I open up this program without the Haltech ECU connected, this thing in the corner was always red, and now it's lit up green, and I would never get this configuration right here. Oh my god, this is amazing. So what do I do? Engine configuration, I'm guessing, right? Engine capacity 2.4. 4 piston 4-stroke, that's right. Number 74. Cranking RPM, I don't know. What's the cranking RPM? Yeah, let's leave it at 380. Oh my god, guys, I don't even know what to do. I don't know where to start. I don't know why I'm whispering. Nobody's in the garage with me. Like I said, it's past 3. What time is it? Just past 3 a.m. I don't know if you guys could see that. Let's look at the focus. There you go. Just past 3 a.m. Guys, I might have to go on YouTube and look up a video on how to set this up. Now, there's only one thing that I wanted to do before getting this far was draining the fuel out the tank, because number one, it's not 91 octane, and number two, the biggest thing is the fuel that's in the tank has been sitting in the tank for over 2 years. So we all know that's not good. So I just haven't gotten around to doing that. Alright, so I watched a quick video and I decided to just go ahead and check DTCs real fast. You can see we got a P0118 engine coolant temperature sensor raw max. Not sure about that. Do I have an engine coolant temp? Yeah, the coolant temp is plugged in. We'll just disregard that for now. But what he said was go to file, upload, just yes. What's in here? No, there should be maps. He said there would be maps in here. Oh, base maps and nothing. Elite default. Okay, I'm not seeing it, guys. I don't know. His tuning software, like, it looked different. The whole setup, the screen looked different, even though using Haltech in his video, everything looked different. So petrol, which is just gasoline, that's what we're using. We're not using ethanol, nothing. Fuel load type, he just talked about this. I guess map sensor, because we don't have a mass airflow sensor on this car, but we do have a map sensor. I don't know, guys. I gotta keep watching this video, but for right now, I would like for it to at least crank the engine. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to start, but it would be pretty sweet knowing that I got some things right if the engine actually cranks over. So I'm still not getting cranking. What's going on here? You know what? Let me go check that the solenoid on the starter is actually plugged in. And yes, it is plugged in. You see it right there. Okay, so that's not it. Alright, so I'm not really finding much in that video I was watching, but I did notice that this thing up here on the left started blinking red, and when I hover on top of it, it says device reboot required. And he did mention something about that because we made changes here. So let's go ahead and do the reboot. Ooh, it primed the fuel pump again. Okay, alrighty then. So I guess every time you make changes to the software, you have to reboot it, which makes sense. You know, I was looking for a option on here to crank the engine, just crank, because you know this ECU can do all of this. It should be able to just, you know, you could basically control every single function from here. So I was looking for a function to test the starter basically, and I'm not seeing it. Alright, I don't think it's gonna make a difference, but let's try. Okay, yeah, so no matter what I do, I can't get it to crank. That's not working. So something else just popped up real fast. I got a error or exclamation mark for the electrical engine starter control, and this thing is turned off, the start stop button. So let's turn that on. Just gonna leave it like that with the on off switch, I guess. And of course it wants to reboot, so let's try that. Okay, let's try it again. I'm still not getting a cranking out of this. Okay guys, so I don't know how I missed this, but so what I did is I switched the start stop button from switch to momentary, since we're actually using a button and not the original key. And then they don't let me change the button action to start the engine, which it's already preset to a short single press. So I'll keep that in mind when I'm trying to start. Just press the engine once, or press the button once, don't hold it down. And then to turn it off, again, a single short press. Here goes the button duration for start and stop. You can see it's just like 1 second. And over here, I completely missed this. Starter motor control enabled. Max starting attempt 3 seconds. Starter engine off. Starter off engine RPM 1000. Okay, guys, I think let's reboot because we gotta save the settings. All right, let's. I'm holding down the clutch. I don't know if it matters, but I'm just doing it anyways. Push the button once to turn everything off, right? Let's push it again. And push it again. And then once in a while, I get this right here, which I don't know what this means. Please choose a device in which you would like to go online. And then read all settings from device or write all settings to device. I don't know what this means. I'm gonna go right, because I saw the guy in the video. He said something about writing is basically saving all that stuff to the ECU. Okay, and of course it wants another reboot. Alright, let's try it again. Guys, I just can't at this point. I might have to throw in the towel for tonight, guys. It's getting late. It's almost 4 a.m. and my phone battery's at like 5%. So that means I physically can't even record anymore. So I decided to plug in that little Haltech USB that came with the ECU, and as soon as I plugged it in, I got an update. So I guess I should do that first. So just going through an update process. Alright, so it's the next day. My phone is charged, computer is charged. I even put a trickle charger on the car battery, so everything is charged. We're good to go. Today I was looking through the files on this USB stick from Haltech, and there actually are base maps on here. So let's see if we can find them. Let's go up to upload. See if we click base maps, there's nothing, right? But let's go into that USB stick. So this is going to be the USB stick right here. Data, base maps, and ours is going to be the first one. Go down to Honda, and we're going to use DC5. So I'm just following that guy's video, and then you notice these say E1000, E1500, E2000. I think these are the ECU that you're using. Obviously we're using the Elite 1500, so we want to click on this one, and you can see something is happening. Vehicle information, vehicle name. Alright, so at this screen I don't know what to do, and I don't want to mess with the settings. Remember, we just opened up a file with the base map in it, and I'm assuming the base map is there for a reason, and you don't want to go messing with it. It's something that they've already configured. So I'm just gonna hit upload all. I don't know, let's see what happens. Alright, it wants to reboot. Alright, you can see over here all the warnings we had are now gone. No check engine light. Now we only have, let's see, error vehicle name. So it wants us to create a vehicle name. Let's just go ahead and do that. I updated the name and all that stuff. Let's see, what's the error that we have now? O2 sensor not set up, which is, sounds about right. I don't have an O2 sensor even installed on this thing, but there's literally no more errors. So what I want to do now is, one thing I am noticing is we now have a check engine light, guys. There was no, well, at least I don't recall there ever being a check engine light. So let's see what happens. I turned it off. I still don't know if I have to push in the clutch. The RPM went up. That's something new. Look at that. That's interesting. Alright, so no progress. It's probably about an hour later. Still can't figure anything out. At this point, I don't know if it's a computer or software issue, something I'm not doing right on a computer, or if it's a physical problem with the wiring. Let's be realistic, guys. Look at this mess I got going on here. So what I want to do is, I did have to go and do some digging, but I did find my original lock cylinder and the key for this thing. Let's go ahead and get rid of this variable push start button crap. Okay, we'll plug this back in how it was from factory, and at least I know with physically turning this key, I know I'm going into the cranking function. Let's see if it makes a difference. Alright, so it's just two connectors that I had to plug in, basically this one right here and this one right here onto the fuse panel, and you can see we already have a beeping sound, you know, classic Honda sound. So let me try to hold this with my legs. We'll turn the key, see what happens if we get power. We do got power. Let's go ahead and crank. And nothing. Okay, so this is not a issue with the push button start. And guys, like I said, when I parked this car here, it was running and it had this push button thing installed on it, and it was working perfectly. So I didn't think that was gonna be it, but at this point you got to start ruling out things. You get what I'm saying? Anyway, yeah, there is absolutely nothing happening with the crank function. So yeah. All right, guys, more progress. So I noticed this harness coming out of the fuse panel right here. It was just hanging, nothing plugged into it. And then I noticed that this connector that did I just unplug this one, guys? I can't even remember now. I'm lost. So I unplugged it because I thought it was part of the push start button, or maybe it is, I don't know, guys. But anyways, I saw that the connectors fit perfectly, so I plugged it in. As soon as I plugged it in, the fuel pump primed up again, and we now have power at the Haltech, guys. So what I want to do now is, let's push in the clutch. We got power to everything. Okay, I just heard the fuel pump prime. Let's see what happens when I turn the key. It worked. Did you hear that?
Are you very excited?
Hell yeah, I'm excited. That's crazy. Mike was just telling me, he's like, don't be surprised if it runs for like a second or two and it backfires. He's like, but yeah.
It didn't sound like it was living its best life.
It doesn't have to live its best life as long as it's living. Of course, it's open header. I don't got the exhaust connected. That's why it was like stupid loud. Let me fix this. This kind of fell off of here when the engine started. All that rattling. I don't know if it's gonna stay up. I should probably zip tied in place. All right, good enough. So I turned on the fan. Hopefully you guys, you know, the noise isn't too loud. Turn on the fan to get the exhaust smoke out the garage. But since it did run for like a second or two, let's go ahead and check DTCs. Single wideband RX timeout. Well, we don't have a wideband connected, so I'm not concerned with that. Trigger reference error. That's one that's a little concerning. DTC P1301 trigger reference error. So it's over here. Okay. So now I'm gonna go through the settings here on the laptop, because we know that the engine and all the wiring, even though it's a crazy mess, it has the functionality to actually crank and run the engine. Basically, I don't think this is no longer a wiring issue. All the wiring is where it's supposed to be. Let me look through the laptop here, see what I can figure out. And at this point, I already tried to crank the engine like a total of 3 times, and it kind of does the same thing. It'll run for like a second or two and then just stall. So yeah, that's where we're at. Alright guys, so it's the next day, and there's 2 issues that I've been thinking about that completely slipped my mind. Number 1, fuel pressure. So when I went out there and checked the fuel pressure on the gauge, this thing was reading like a max like 35 psi. Whereas the Haltech system is saying like 43 psi what it wants. So all I did was simply raise the pressure on the fuel pressure regulator. So that's good, okay? And then another thing that's been bothering me ever since we put in the base map is on other people's YouTube videos, when you see them go through the setup process of putting in the base map, for some reason their setup asks them what type of injectors they're running. Well, I never got that prompt to ask me what kind of injectors I'm running. So I did end up finding a YouTube video where the guy was showing where it's at, and it's actually right here on the left side. We see where it says stage 1. You click on stage 1 and then you click on this box, and it lets you pick the type of injectors that you have. And as you can see, I already went ahead and picked mine. So I got the ID 1050X. So clicked on those, hit OK. Let me turn the key on so we got power to the Haltech. Fuel pump is priming, and of course it wants us to reboot the ECU. So it's going to do another prime. With those 2 changes made, fuel pressure and actually putting the correct injector size, I would imagine that would make a big difference. So let's see what happens. I'm going to go ahead, hold the clutch down, put the ignition in my, or between my knees here to hold it while I turn the key. Okay, I'm like crazy nervous. Let's go ahead and start it. It's actually running, it's idling all by itself. Oh, it's amazing. I just had a feeling, guys. I just knew, like, you know what? I got a feeling that if we put the correct injectors, because it never asked me for that type of stuff before. And I'm like, we need to find where the computer, where the software is asking for our injector type. And I think it'll make a difference. And sure as heck it did. Oh my goodness, God, today, you know, today's my oldest daughter, my first daughter's birthday. Okay, July 8th. And I'm considering this day the first day that this K24 is born, because it's the first day that it actually idled all by itself. So this engine was born the same day my daughter was. That's amazing. What a great day. I'm oh man, guys, 7 years I've been building this project. It's absolutely nuts. It's what a relief off of my shoulders that to know that the engine runs. You get what I'm saying? Jesus, man. You know what, this type of stuff really gives you the motivation to move forward and keep pushing with the projects. There's so many project cards that don't get finished, but guys, I am ecstatic today.